Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Thursday, February 12th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Gene Mattis on SAG-AFTRA's contract talks with the major studios and streamers. They've been at it for about 2 days, and we'll find out what Gene is hearing about what's going on in that room. And Emily Longaretta joins us to pay tribute to actor James Van Der Beek. He left us far too soon at the age of 48 on Wednesday. Before we talk about the hard stuff, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. You know the Berlin Film Festival and European Film Market are going on when you see headlines in Variety like Chilean punk rock dramedy being shopped ahead of its festival premiere. Matapunki revolves around a hard-living rocker who takes a mysterious drink at a party and gains supernatural powers. Minerva Pictures, based in Rome, is handling sales of the debut feature from Diego Fuentes. Speaking of European festivals, the lineup for Series Mania next month is coming into focus. The Testaments, Hulu's follow-up to The Handmaid's Tale, will open the event in Lille, France. Ann Dowd, no less than Aunt Lydia herself, will be on hand for the event that is billed as Europe's largest TV festival. Series Mania runs March 20th through 27th. There was another big passing on Wednesday, Bud Cort. He was the star of the beloved 1971 movie Harold and Maude. That film meant as much to its generation as Dawson's Creek means to millennials. If you know, you know. I hope somewhere Cort, Ruth Gordon, and director Hal Ashby are enjoying a nice cup of tea. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Gene Mattis, Variety's senior media writer and our labor beat reporter, gives us an update on the status of Hollywood's collective bargaining talks. It all started on Monday, February 9th, when SAG-AFTRA sat down with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers in Sherman Oaks. Gene Mattis, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to do it.
Well, you're in that hurry up and wait position. A major union in this town, SAG-AFTRA, sat down on Monday for collective bargaining negotiations for a master film and TV contract. It doesn't get more impactful or widespread than that contract, which is basically what most actors work under for most movies and television shows. But of course, they have circled the wagons. They have a media blackout. What are you hearing? What vibes are you getting from the room there in Sherman Oaks right now?
Obviously, it's pretty quiet, and I think it's all going fairly routinely in the sense of the first day you trade proposals, and then you take a few days on each side to study the other side's proposals. So not much happens or is expected to happen in certainly the first week of negotiations. And they are going to bargain through the month and actually through, I think, March 6th. So they've got some time to kind of hash this out. So I wouldn't expect any drama really until then. And they may decide to punt, honestly, into June and really tackle the serious stuff then.
Well, they do have, there is a ticking clock element, and there are two other big unions in line to get their turn at the table. Is there anything you gleaned from the SAG proposal?
Well, obviously their proposals are confidential at the moment, but what we understand they're focused on is, obviously the AI piece, specifically on the synthetic performer side of it, which is the Tilly Norwood, for lack of a better term, the Tilly Norwood type of character where it doesn't look like any particular actor. It's just a synthetic amalgamation of other performances. And there's a question from SAG over how much control can we assert over that, since it doesn't resemble any of our members directly. So, can we insert ourselves into that and say, no, if you're going to do that, you need to pay pension and health, or you need to pay on top of that. And they have actually had success with something like that with the commercials agreement. And the idea is if we can drive up the cost of that, then maybe we'll keep our members employed, because if there's no cost savings to be gained by doing a synthetic performer, then why do it? So that's a major thing, obviously. Another huge thing is the streaming residual issue and the question of streaming bonuses, which I think have been quite disappointing to a lot of the members. So that was obviously something that was won in 2023. This bonus for your residual if your show is one of the most watched shows. I think that has come in under expectations, and there's an attempt to boost the figures on that.
Sweeten that. I know you tracked this carefully. It took a bit for those coffers to fill up, of course, under the formula where if a show hit a certain predetermined viewership level, then everybody would get a bonus. And I know you tracked that very carefully. Actors have gotten money from that, or is that still
I have not heard that. I have heard that we are in the process and the wheels are in motion, and we've got the framework set up, and the checks will be going out any day now, but I have not actually heard that someone actually got money from that.
If there's really been nothing going out from SAG's fund, which had its own, a different construction than the other guilds, that is certainly going to be a discussion at the table. Let me ask you about the AI of it all. Obviously, for actors, the issues with likeness are just enormous. Do you have any sense that there is a level of anger or concern or a galvanizing issue that actors could really get behind and just say, this is a line, we must have this in our contract?
No, to be brief about it, I think the number one thing, honestly, is that the lack of jobs. So start with that. Now, sometimes you get a sense in the way they talk about the negotiations going in that we're going to draw these red lines and we're going to really fight hard. There has been nothing like that. It has been very much like, we think they'll be reasonable and we'll be reasonable and, no drama. And honestly, they don't have the leverage they would have had 3 years ago when everybody was working and the studios were extremely focused on let's keep this thing going as much as we can. And so that was a high leverage point.
When you talk of weakened leverage points, all three guilds to varying degrees need some help. They need a capital influx in their health plans. And there's just no question in the Machiavellian world of who has leverage. When you need a significant influx from the person on the other side of the table, you just don't have the ability to rally as hard around a single issue as animating as AI can be. Let's talk about a wrinkle in these talks that has been floated by the AMPTP, setting a contract that runs longer than 3 years, like 4 or 5 years. Of course, the industry has for many years now been on a cycle of 3-year deals. Of course, management would like to see those be longer. They'd like to have a little more peace in between contracts. But at this time, especially with all that we've been talking about, the rapid advance of technology, I think anything longer than a 3-year deal would seem like a really hard sell.
I have not heard any interest in that at all from anybody on the union side. So everybody that I've heard from on that side has shot it down immediately. And, they might want to at least go through the motions of talking about it, but I don't see that as, it feels like a DOA type proposal at this point.
I would think the only thing that might get it maybe 4 years could be if the numbers on the health plan are even worse than we know. So that would seem to be the only outside chance, but the specter of technology and AI development, anything beyond 3 years would seem an eternity, and I think a super hard sell to the membership. But again, we don't know until we know. What do you think is the typical cadence of this? They'll probably talk for a few more days and then take a break.
I feel like it's sort of a slow burn. And, deadline definitely concentrates everybody's minds. And so looking closer to that March 6th date of like, are we close? Do we need a few more days maybe to work it out? Or are we so far apart that we need to just put pencils down and then come back after they talk to WGA, after they talk to DGA? So somewhere around first week of March, I think we'll have a better idea of how far apart they are.
Well, at this point, the schedule calls for the Writers Guild of America to sit down on March 16th, which is just under 5 weeks away. And it calls for the Directors Guild of America to sit down on May 11th, which is 3 months from today. A lot can transpire in between. And Jean, thank you so much for being on top of all things involving collective bargaining. It's a very complicated beat.
Yep, happy to do it.
An actor who came to define his generation of TV and movies died on Wednesday. James Van Der Beek left us far too soon. His boy-next-door ambition and vulnerability helped make Dawson's Creek an instant sensation in 1998 when it roared onto the WB network. In the last 20 years, Van Der Beek managed the transition from youthful stardom to adult roles about as well as anyone. Emily Longaretta, Variety's director of features, was a big fan and interviewed Beek several times, including at his last public appearance. Longaretta explained why the personality known as the Beek became such a beloved figure for millennials who embraced Dawson's Creek and Varsity Blues as their own. Emily Longaretta, thank you so much for joining me. This is a sad and somber occasion.
Yes, it absolutely is. Thanks for having me on.
James Beek died Wednesday at the age of 48. This sad headline just really hits hard. It just kind of crystallizes what Dawson's Creek. It represented an absolute moment in time, a late 1990s moment in time. It was a big show for the WB network, really kind of helped establish its worldview of these young adult dramas. Emily, how did you feel when you first heard this sad news?
I was absolutely devastated. Dawson's Creek was the show that made me fall in love with TV. So it's the reason I have a Dawson's Creek tattoo, because it really did change TV for me and for the WB for sure. And also, I think that James Beek was the perfect person to lead this. You know, the creator, Kevin Williamson, based a lot of the show on his own life, and he had to find someone who could embody the character based on himself. And I think something that James did so beautifully in this, it was portraying this emotional young man who is not afraid to not be the jock, who is not afraid to cry and lean on his parents and be honest about his love for love and have this moral center and authenticity about him that really only James could bring to the character. There wouldn't be Dawson's Creek without Dawson, and there wouldn't be Dawson without James. So I think that he took this character that was, you know, sometimes not people's favorites, yet made it still so likable and made a full career out of it. I mean, he wasn't just someone who was in a show once and then you never saw him again. He went on to do movies like Varsity Blues and Texas Rangers and Rules of Attraction, and then appeared in a ton of TV shows. And I think, you know, one of his other most popular one was Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, where he played a fictionalized version of himself. He was able to just lean in fully to the comedy of who he is and poke fun in a nice way at some of the things he's done as being in a teen soap.
He absolutely did not take himself too seriously. And I think many times you saw him doing stuff for charity, kind of using his voice for the right causes. I think this passing really hit me because I absolutely remember when the WB network was really excited. They were introducing this fresh face cast, and Columbia TriStar was the studio. Dawson's had a lot of support because you had an outside studio, and WB was invested. I think they saw this as their friends. You know, this is a group of kids in an interesting setting, and it was to the credit of Suzanne Daniels and Jordan Levin. They saw that there was a void in the marketplace. Let me ask you, as a viewer, again, perfectly situated as you were, can you remember what it was about the show, what the style, the tone, or the star? What was it that stood out to you that made this like, whoa, I got to watch this show?
It was honestly the story. I mean, the stories between and the character interactions were so incredible and so strong and so relatable. I think as someone who grew up in a small town, I think it's really comforting to see that other people in other small towns around the world are going through the same thing. And they're going through, you know, the same kind of issues that might not seem like these huge issues in big cities, but are a big issue of asking someone to prom or dealing with a parent who's an addict or something like that, that really, really hits home and hits close to home. And the way that this show was able to just really be relatable for people watching, I think, was the reason that it hooked me. And the characters were flawed. That not every character was likable. There were a lot of things Dawson did that weren't likable, but for some reason you really did feel this closeness to these characters and felt like they were an extension of your family or your friends, or who you wanted as your family or friends if maybe you were in a bit lonelier, that made you want to keep watching. I mean, I was canceling plans on Wednesday nights because I wasn't going to be missing that. And I know I'm not alone. I know that's the reason why it was so successful.
This really was the show that turned the WB, and then it really went into kind of its peak years of cultural influence. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was definitely there first in 1997, no question. And then almost a year later, Dawson's Creek came along from the guy who had written Scream. Kevin Williamson had this like burgeoning career in features, and at that time, if you had traction in features, the last thing you were going to do was television, for goodness sakes. But this was a different generation. And Kevin Williamson had a lot of stories in him, and one of them was Dawson's Creek. Just week after week that first season, it put up insane numbers in teens and young adults, and it was pretty much off to the races. Think about that cast: Michelle Williams, Katie Holmes, James Van Der Beek, and Joshua Jackson. That's 4 home runs in a row.
That's right. And none of them were known at all. Joshua Jackson was the only one who had done anything with Mighty Ducks. So he came in feeling like the experienced one. And they just went to this small town in Wilmington, North Carolina, and everything changed from then on.
And did you ever do a significant sit-down interview with James Van Der Beek?
I did, yes. And I did 2 separate times with him over the last 10 years. But the last time I saw him was actually his last panel I moderated in Austin, Texas, where he was living. It was a Kevin Williamson retrospective on his career, and a few people from his career came. And James was a last-minute addition because, of course, it was a couple months ago, so he wasn't in the greatest health. But because Kevin had given him Dawson and had really helped his career, he said, "I'll be there. It doesn't matter. I'll be fine." And so the morning of, he confirmed, and he was there. His wife was there. 4 of his 6 children were there, and he could not have more positive things to say. And he was in great spirits. He's just so grateful. And I think him showing up for Kevin to honor him is just, I would assume, a legacy that he wants to be known for, is, his kindness and his willingness to be grateful for other people that have helped him throughout the way.
Even in the face of incredible hardship, when he went public with his diagnosis with colon cancer, which, as we all know, is very prevalent, and so awareness is so important, he was very open with that. I know this is a big passing for millennials, for sure. So, the world works in mysterious ways.
Sure does.
The first mention of James Van Der Beek in Variety's pages came on April 15th, 1994. He's listed in the cast of an out-of-town revival in Connecticut of the musical Shenandoah. 3 months later, Van Der Beek is listed in the cast of the 1995 New Line Cinema film Angus, opposite Kathy Bates, George C. Scott, Rita Moreno, and Chris Owens. Then Van Der Beek went through about a 2.5-year drought of no mentions in Variety until he came charging back on January 19th, 1998 in our review of Dawson's Creek. Our critics singled him out high up in the review for giving a, quote, terrific, end quote, performance. We were right. As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Don't miss my colleague William Earle's story about his correspondence with MAGA-embracing men after he wrote a column comparing Bad Bunny's halftime show with the performance of Kid Rock at the Turning Point USA event. It's not what you think, and Bill handles it with great sensitivity and empathy. Listeners of Daily Variety should sign up for our new newsletter, What to Hear. It covers news and trends in the podcasting world, and it's edited by my great colleague Todd Spangler, who is Variety's business editor. He has covered podcasting since its inception. What to Hear is bi-weekly, and it's free, so please go to Variety.com and look for email preferences to sign up. And finally, on Friday's Strictly Business podcast, Daily Variety's companion interview show, don't miss my colleague Jennifer Maz's sit-down with Funko CEO Josh Simon. The interview comes just in time for the Toy Fair trade show to be held in New York, and in fact, the conversation is a lot of fun. Before we go, congrats to Ellie Klein. The veteran talent rep has been promoted to partner at TFC Management. Klein joined TFC in 2021 after years as a 10%er with Paradigm's literary division. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Jean Mattis and Emily Longaretta. Sticks, nicks, hick picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice. Daily Variety will take Monday off for the President's Day holiday, so please tune in Tuesday for another episode of Daily Variety.